What's up, guys? Today we're here again with the Shinsen Miata, and there has been a bit of work done to it, but I'll go ahead and cover that in a sort of update video next week. But what we're doing today is a very important upgrade. It's a reliability upgrade, so it's going to be something that we're going to be able to use in the long run forever, basically. And that is, it is a crank saver. So if you do not know much about the Miatas, they have one, I don't want to call it a fatal flaw, but it's pretty much a fatal flaw in the engine. And that is the crank material gets actually kind of soft where the timing sprocket is attached to it. So if you guys are familiar with timing, there is a timing sprocket and then a woodruff key that fits into a little groove, and then that woodruff key keeps the timing sprocket in time with the actual crank itself. So if you guys don't know, these engines have an issue where that timing sprocket will actually start to bend the crank with that woodruff key. And what happens is then your timing gets off, and these are non-interference engines, but what happens is it really messes up your crank. And when that happens, you either have to get a new crank, or usually it's just easier to get a whole new engine. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to fix that problem with what is called a crank saver. So let's go ahead and check it out. Alright guys, it is this tiny little piece right here. And really the main important thing is this, is a longer woodruff key. So what this does is this sits at the front of the crank, and you can see it's got a groove in it right there. And this basically extends the effective crank area, and then it also extends the woodruff key. Now what this does is it sandwiches all together with the bolt on the front here. We just put the crank bolt in right there, and it sandwiches it all together, and that gives it enough strength and rigidity to hold the crank, or the timing sprocket onto the crank correctly, and it will stop the marring of our crank. Now, the most notable way to figure out if your car is suffering from this is with what is called the wobbly crank. So it is a little bit difficult to see on this right here, but right down in there is our crank. And when the car is running, if your car is suffering from this, you'll actually see it wobbling a lot. Now, mine isn't doing this. It only has 77,000 miles on it, so it is fairly low mileage. But we want to go ahead and nip this in the bud. We don't want to give it a chance to even start marring at all. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to pull off our crank, the actual crank itself. If you guys aren't familiar with Miatas, it's just 3 bolts holding on that actual pulley. And then there is one main crank bolt, and we're going to go ahead and take that off as well. When we do that, we're going to go ahead and set it to 60 degrees BTDC. That should put the least amount of tension from the cams onto everything, and it should allow us to just slide out the old stuff, put on, or I guess the old woodruff key is really all we're taking out, and then put on the new woodruff key and crank saver. It should be super duper simple. If you guys couldn't tell, I've already got it up in the air. I've got I got a jack and then some jack stands underneath there. But what we're going to go ahead and do is just reach from underneath. It should be fairly easy, and we're going to get that bolt down there. We're just going to go ahead and start pulling things out. Alright, so here we are under the car, and I went ahead, this is actually a 13/16 socket, because I believe the crank is 20 millimeters and I don't have a 20 mil. It might be 21, double check that, whatever 13/18 or 16th translates to. It is a good fit, so I don't care about marring anything. But this sway bar was in the way, so I did have to lower the links a little bit. If you can see that, they're just down a little bit. And what I went ahead and did is rotated it. I'll go ahead and show you guys. So now if we come over here, it might be a little difficult to see. You see those ticks on the crank pulley? They're lined up with that guy right there, that little kind of, I don't even know what you'd call it, just like a little peg basically. And that means we're at 60 degrees BTDC. Now if we had taken that and rotated it over this way, you can see right there is the regular timing, but we want it to be a little bit before. This is going to give us the least amount of tension on everything, and it is all lined up. Now what we're going to go ahead and do is stick the car into 5th gear, basically just the lowest gear you can possibly do, and that's going to lock the engine pretty much where it is at. It won't let it move anymore. And when we do that, we can go ahead and take our wrench now and loosen up the crank pulley. Now I was looking at this, and I thought we were going to have to take off the 4 bolts that hold it on. If you guys can see those bolts in there. I don't think we're going to have to. I think we're going to be okay. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in 5th. And I'm going to crank on that, see if I can get it off. I really hope I don't have to get an impact or something, because there's not much room in here. But I might just get a big bar and stick it on the end of my wrench and pull really hard. But we should be able to get that off and then install our crank saver. Alright guys, so it is looking really good. I just got the crank bolt off. I did have to kind of advance it a little bit because when I started cranking backwards, it actually rotated the engine backwards. I'd say probably 15 degrees or so. And you really don't want to rotate an engine backwards. It's not the worst thing in the world, especially if you're just kind of going slow. But, you know, I went forward a little bit, then had to put it in gear so that it would kind of bind up, and then rotated backwards. I think that backwards rotation was just from the play in the clutch plate, how it's a sprung clutch. But either way, I got it off with a little bit of work, didn't have to use an impact, and you can see right in there is our woodruff key. Now, my crank looks really good. You can see that it's not deformed at all. There actually might even be a little bit, if you guys can see, there's orange in the bottom corner there. There might be some Loctite. That's a common fix on this. But what we're going to go ahead and do is try really hard to get that old key out right there. And it actually, I can't tell if it is a elongated key or not. It's a little bit difficult to tell. I've never seen a Miata key before. But we're going to go ahead and take it out and then try to replace it with this one right here, which is our brand new extended one. And if we just put in the cranksaver like this, you saw it would actually kind of come out to most of this. We do want to go ahead and give it as good of a chance as we can with a really, really long one. But the one in there already looks pretty long. So if we can't get it out, we'll go ahead and just stick in the cranksaver. Because this, just pushing on it helps to sandwich it all together anyways. But having the extended key really is the best way to go. So I'm going to grab some pliers and we're going to see if we can get that out. Alright guys, so as you can see, I wasn't able to get the old key out. I'm pretty confident that if you just put in the cranksaver right now, it would work just as well. But I do want to go ahead, I have everything already. I'm just going to go ahead and pull off all this main crank pulley here, and we should be able to get it off. Now the plan is to just go ahead and remove the two belts. This one, the power steering, is the tensioner for this guy, and then the alternator right here is the tensioner for this one. So there's a bolt up there and a bolt up there. I'll go ahead and take you through that in just a sec. And then once those belts are off, we have these 4 10mm here you can see. And once those are removed, we should be able to pull off basically this whole assembly kind of thing. You might be able to tell there's a little bit of rust around the outside on that ring there. So we're going to go ahead and just kind of hit it with a little bit of PB Blaster before we start. Try to get that to work in there. But since we did put this in a position where there shouldn't be any like want to spin, really it's when we pull out that woodruff key that anything will happen. But we should be good. So we're going to go ahead and pull off all these belts and pull off the pulley. And we'll go ahead and get the new extended key in. Alright guys, so here we are up on top. This is the power steering pump and the tensioner is right here. We're going to go ahead and break this bolt loose right here. You do have to hold it from the other side. It is just a simple through bolt. These are 12mm. This is also 12mm. This is the tensioner right here. Go ahead and loosen that up. Give the belt a yank and it'll go ahead and loosen it. Very similar over here on the alternator. So I got the belt in the way. Up on top here we've got a bolt on the top of the alternator. That is also a 12mm. Go ahead and loosen that up. You don't have to take it out, just loosen it. And then, if you can see right there is the tensioner bolt. Go ahead and just loosen that as well. Give it a yank. Everything is all good. Now you can see. Alright guys, here is the power steering pump. And this is our tensioner right here. This is a 12mm. Go ahead and crack this loose. You do have to hold it from the back because it's just a simple through bolt. And then this is also a 12mm tensioner. Very similar setup over here on the alternator. Sorry I got the belt in the way, but there is a bolt on top that is 12mm. Go ahead and crack that loose. And then right there is the tensioner. Go ahead and loosen that up. These you just kind of tug on the belt and then it will go ahead and pull everything out. Now, I've already gone ahead and loosened those up as you can tell. Let me get this light in here. Perfect. And I've also removed the pulley as you can see. So now what we're left up here is just our timing belt. So this is exactly what we want. It looks really good. We're going to go ahead and double check. You can tuck the timing belt, make sure it's in good condition. Mine is in good condition. And we're going to go ahead and just lightly push. You can see there's not much tension on either side of this, which means that we are perfect. When we go ahead and pull this out, it's not going to slip and spin, because if it does, then we'll have to go ahead and actually retime the engine by pulling a bunch of this stuff off, and we don't want to do that. We're just trying to do this quick and simple. So I'm going to go ahead and just knock this with a light mallet. We don't really want to mess anything up because that will actually start denting this gear. We just want to knock this loose. I think mine has a little bit of Loctite on it. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab some pliers and just pull it right out. Alright guys, well a lot went on between what you last saw and now. I went ahead and got the old one out. It did take a little bit of prying with some pliers and some vice grips that were very helpful to hold on to it. But I did eventually get it out and it wasn't too bad. But it was a very tight fit, and so that actually led to the next problem, was getting the new one in. So I tried really hard to get the new one in just by like wiggling it, pushing it. I cleaned it out with a little PV blaster and then some WD-40 to try to get it to slip in there, and it really didn't want to go in. So the thing that I ended up doing was actually over here. This is the crank bolt right here, and this is a bolt that is the exact same thread pattern. And what I did is I put the crank saver on the, well, technically this bolt. The crank bolt is a little bit too short, but I put the crank saver on here, and then I just lined everything up, and I used this bolt to draw it in. Now, I don't normally recommend pushing things in with bolts, because that's not really the way you should do it. It should just slide in. You don't want to shave anything off accidentally. But the reason I was okay with doing this was because the crank saver, it was slotted perfectly so that it fit, and then also the harmonic balancer is also slotted. So basically what that means is the woodruff key was surrounded on all sides by metal, except for of course the piece that I was pressing in on the outside at least. And that means that it wouldn't really have anywhere else to go other than straight forward and directly down. So I went ahead and tightened it in. This is a 7/8. I'm not sure what bearing that has on you at all. This is probably an M14 or an M16. It's quite a large bolt. I'm sure you can look up what the Miata crank bolt is. But so I went ahead and just pushed it in with this. I used this because this was too short, remember. And then once I got in, probably halfway on the threads on here, I wanted to make sure that I didn't accidentally bottom out because this isn't threaded as far. So I went ahead and backed this out and then just used the stock crank bolt, and that worked fine. So I went ahead and tightened it down, and I made sure that I never put too much torque on it. You know, you don't want to like force it in. But if you're making good progress and it's sliding in semi-easily, you know, there's not too much to worry about. So as you saw, I went ahead and got it correctly pushed in, and it is all seated properly, and I think it looks awesome now. So we're going to go ahead and put this guy in. We're going to put a little bit of Loctite on, that's what it calls for, and then the torque spec for this is actually pretty high. It's 116 to 128 foot-pounds. So that's pretty big. I do have a torque wrench that'll fit that, thankfully, but it's going to take a little bit of squirming under the car to get it. So I'm going to go ahead and put this back in, and then we're going to be pretty much done other than putting all of the bolts, or sorry, all the belts back on the harmonic balancer. Alright guys, well I got all of the belts back on, and I also got the sway bar bolted back together. If you took that off, don't forget that. It's not super detrimental, but you don't want to lose the brackets. Anyways, that is it guys. I just have to put on my air intake, but that kind of blocks the view of these belts. So I'm going to go ahead and say this is it for now. If you guys have any questions about what I did, definitely drop a comment down below. I'll try to leave a link for the crank saver that I got. I did buy it on eBay. I want to say it was about $70, but I think 100% worth it in my opinion. So I hope this helped you guys. Definitely drop a comment if you have any questions, and I'll see you guys later.